So hello, how have you been? This is Raman Kashyap from Monk Bruce Audio, and today in my hands I have something that I've been again meaning to review for a very long time, and it's from a brand that I have personally owned a few units of, and it's a brand that I have spent a lot of time with regarding their other offerings. They're specifically known for their planars, and let me just allow you to take a quick guess on what the brand is. Sounds familiar? Sounds popular? Yes, it's the Astralis from Letshuoer. And I have had a good experience with planars from Letshuoer in general. I've formerly owned the S12 Pro and I have reviewed the S12 Ultra, which was a massive improvement to my ears compared to the others in the S12 lineup. I haven't heard the SO8, and apart from that, I personally own the Letshuoer Cadenza 4, which has been actually one of the best IEMs I've reviewed in that price range over and under because of how capable the IEM is. And there's a lot of good things for me to say about the Astralis and why I feel that Letshuoer might have been a bit too late in introducing this IEM to the common masses. So let's sit back, enjoy, be hydrated, and get right into the sound because this is a set that has been loaned by a friend of mine to me, so I don't have the full unboxing experience to provide you for just for the IEMs. And the majority of this review has been conducted in with the Divinus Velvet narrow bore ear tips. So without wasting further time, let's go on how the sound is of the Astralis. Okay, so now let's dive right deep into the sound of the Astralis. And as usual, my sound review is divided into three parts. One is the lows, the mids, and the highs. And this time for the lows, I have chosen three tracks to see how capable the Astralis is at a first glance. And the first one is Limelight by Rush, the second one is Mariscos by Tipper, and the third one is Get Lucky by Daft Punk. So through Limelight, the Astralis on this track has had a relatively boomy presentation. The rumbling notes from the bass lines tended to get in the way of the drums, and this was something that I hadn't actually hoped for, given how hyped the Astralis has been. And this also affects the kicks in a way which adversely hampered my perception of the decay. Because while I could see that the attack was being fast, reasonably fast, and especially for a planar, the decay is something that actually felt sluggish, and it felt consistently sluggish the more I listened to this track. And I had to loop it a few times to see if my impressions were correct or not. And on throughout the loops, I found that the decay was sluggish. And if I were to judge the notes from the bass itself, my assessment remains the same. And notes tended to actually roll off in a less detailed manner. While this confusion ensued, the Astralis still managed to get the vocals to be positioned slightly towards the right and coming on to the center for the most time, and the cymbals were untouched. So if I were to judge my perception of the lows only via this track, it would actually paint an incomplete picture because the Astralis comes off much stronger in Daft Punk's Get Lucky, where I found that the previous boom that I've observed in Limelight subsides to a larger degree here. And the whole IEM actually displayed a very improved coherence regarding the attack and the decay of the bass. Although, once again, the cutoff could have been shorter on the decay. And subsequently, it doesn't superimpose itself over the other beats that the track has because they already have the potency to being of sounding good overall. So if the cutoff of the decay was timed right, the entire track would have fully ignored all the qualms or the complaints that I had, which I had heard in Limelight. So you can right now say that it takes a few shifts in genres to gauge the actual strength of the Astralis. While it performed somewhat ho-hum in Limelight, In Get Lucky, it was a complete different beast of sorts. And moving on to Mariscos, here the Astralis finally sets its curve of redemption. In the intro of the track, there is a particular rippling perception, which the Astralis captures beautifully. And when I compare it to non-planar sets like the Fola and the P7, for instance, the Astralis actually did a mildly better job in getting the rippling sounding as crisp as possible. And once the rippling effect goes on in favor of the phasing and the fuzzing effect that the track has, uh, everything is reproduced accurately by the Astralis. And once the beats come in and the drop lands, the impact of the notes, of the bass notes of the Astralis is quite polished, I would say. And there is no haziness observed, which once again I had observed in Limelight. So, along with that, the beats also hit very potently. And I would say that it's a strong recovery curve. Whatever I had observed in its previous iterations in attack, here the Astralis displays nothing of it. And even if it does, it's a very small, uh, let's say, error percentage. And as the beats come in and go out, the Astralis doesn't forget to emphasize the other elements of this track, which makes this whole mix sound quite different from what my previous perception was. And this is why I chose these three tracks, because they belong to wildly different genres, and that's why I got to know that the Astralis is genre dependent. And let's see if this continues towards the mid range. Okay, so now that we have settled how dependent the Astralis is given the situation and the mood of the genres that it gets presented with, let's see if this continues to the mid range as well, where I'm trying to keep the genres as diverse as possible. But two tracks were enough to show actually how good the Astralis is. One is First Aid Give It by Queens of the Stone Age, and the second one is Lateralus by Tool. So now, in First Aid Give It, the Astralis finally stops holding itself back and extends pretty deep into the perceived stage, if not wide. And again, it's a controversial topic that stage does not really exist in IEMs, but whatever we can gauge about the stage is merely psychoacoustics. That's why I'm using the word perceived before describing the stage. So the perceived stage on this IEM extends pretty deep. It is reasonably wide, but nothing to write home about. And the height of the stage was ordinary, to say the least. But given how deep the stage extends, this actually benefits the snares on this track, because I could hear the timbre and the resonance of the snares on this track before anything else. My whole concentration of the sound in this track actually started and ended with how good the snares were sounding. And this is a track that has an unorthodox setup where the snare rolls off in a band kind of a way, and it's also set in a flat major key. So tonality here stayed warmer than what I would have preferred, but timbre seemed to be accurately rendered. And each stroke of the snares was bouncing off quite crisp and right through the bass. And I appreciate the fact that here that the Astralis kept the bass at bay so that it lets the other elements of the track come out. And whatever problem I had observed previously regarding the vocal positioning, here it is mitigated to a very good extent, where for the majority of the time I could find the vocals position center, although it was a bit pushed back, but the cymbals were being equally emphasized along with the vocals. So at first glance I can actually say that the Astralis does a good job in retaining the imaging and separation capabilities that an IM of this at this price range is capable of, and I would say it slightly delivers above than what I am used to in the segment. Now moving on to Lateralus by Tool, the Astralis continues its robust display of power, and it's not vulgar. Okay, it also gives, and this robust display of power, it gives the drums on this track its much needed resonance, which results in its timbre being fairly very accurate. So now I can say beyond reasonable doubt that the Astralis does not have that typical planar metallic timbre that is observed in certain other IEMs, which I actually did observe in an IEM that I own, which is the Heyday, and the other IEM that I had the pleasure of trying out, the 7 Hertz Timeless 1 and 2. So compared to that, the timbre on the Astralis is significantly less metallic in perception, stays fairly accurate. And I must also say that guitars on the track sound incredibly full. Like the weight and body of the notes is clearly very defined, and it doesn't muddy up the rest of the sound. So while the fullness of the guitars is coming at your face, you are also greeted with how polished the bass is synchronizing with the drums. And when the breakdown comes in, where Carey finishes his rudiments uh, and lets Justin wad a bass out, the whole whine pattern from start to finish throughout the breakdown, along with Maynard's vocals, is accurately reproduced without any bloat, mud, or confusion from the Astralis. So, to summarize the entire perception on the mid range, here, whatever you throw at the Astralis, it's going to hit you back loud, strong, and perfectly clear. And let's see what my perception is on the highs of this IEM. So, stick around. So now that we have seen how good the Astralis is through the mid-range, let's see if it can keep its charade up in through the highs. And for the highs, I have done a very good decision according to my own standards of choosing these two tracks for daily assessment. And the tracks are Take 5 by Dave Brubeck and Icarus by Patricia Barber. And they have been a significant improvement to my test playlist on Apple Music as well. I'll be giving the link down. And so let's start with Take 5 first. So right out of the gate, the tonality through the horns that the intro section has, it's actually warmer than what I would have liked, or mostly warmer than what I have heard through sets in the same price range. If I were to compare it with sets like the Aful P7 or the Tanjim Fola, for instance, the Astralis delivers the horns warmer than both sets do. And the moment the cymbals, pianos, and the drums kick in on this track, the warmth, the perceived warmth, is subsided to a very good extent. And the experience further enhances from the 2 minute 30-second mark when the channels split up or across both sides of the ear. And the reason why I have this track frequently come on in my playlist is because when the channel splits up, most sets in this price range, they kind of scramble across in its imaging capabilities, which dampens my impression by a good notch. And the Astralis performs ridiculously well when the channels split up as well. It renders the notes of the drums quite well. There is a nice extension, and the weight and body of the notes is evenly distributed. And the resonance, specifically the resonance and the perceived timbre on the snares and the floor toms, was something that was very delicious. If that's the way I'm going to put it, it was very delicious when I was listening it through the Astralis. And when the section again stops being a drum solo and mixes it with the pianos, the snares kind of tango along in a very nice, bouncy, fun way. And there's not a analytic lens to the Astralis, because I'm not going to label it falsely as an IEM meant for analysis. But if you want to have fun through genres like jazz, then the Astralis is going to be doing a very fine job at that. And this further continues when I switch back to Icarus, where the Astralis now lets some sibilance come into the track. Although, if I were to compare it with other sets in its range, the Astralis still keeps it at mitigated, to say the least. And I cannot say that my own planar set, which is the Tangzhou Heyday, does a better job at it. The Tangzhou Heyday came off more sibilant than the Astralis, at least here. And when I heard other planars, like the Timeless one, for instance, the sibilance was present, but Astralis had a lesser degree on it. And whatever preservation it could do regarding the lush, gorgeous vocals of Patricia Barber, it did a damn fine job at it, because I was enjoying this track once again very nicely. And timbre through the guitar and the percussion remain fairly accurate. And now we can actually say that the Astralis is going to be doing a very good job at it. It's not very planar like as most people would actually describe. It's not dry. It's not metallic. It's fairly accurate to a very good degree, and that's the way I would put it as. So moving along the line, tonality once again still remained warmer than what I would have liked, but when Patricia's straight note sustain kicks in, the Astralis lets her scale as high as she can get without being too sibilant, and definitely not being fatiguing, not being piercing, not being shouty. And this is what actually surprised me with the Astralis. I actually came in to this IM expecting that it's actually going to be shouty, it's going to be fatiguing, and none of that actually happened. And this sibilance that I heard, it can be mitigated with extensive tip rolling as well as EQing. But if I were not EQing it, I can tank some of that sibilance by myself, and I'm going to take it away. It's all right. It's just being borderline sibilant. It's not really hampering my overall listening experience, while my ears are getting tired. So safe to say that across moments, the Astralis will definitely come off sibilant, but it's not that bothersome. I can definitely say that the entire time that I heard this IM, I never found myself looking across the words fatigue, pierce, or shout. So it's a damn well controlled IM in this regard. So that's about it mostly for the sound. So let's dive right into the concluding section of this review. So the conclusion is going to be a bit short on this one, because I have spoken at length about how I feel about regarding this IEM, and I would say one thing, that this is going to be a very polarizing IEM. Depending upon your HRTF or preferences, this IEM is either going to floor you, or this IEM is going to disappoint you, and a good chunk of it goes into how it delivers the sound. And I'm not going to ignore the fact that the Astralis is also a fit dependent IEM, where I actually had one of my friends try the Astralis, and he had to downsize to the excess size of the K-Bear coffee to have a fit, while I'm using, I think, ML on the Divinus Velvet narrowboard, which are fairly large ear tips to say the least. Depending upon the feet and sill, assuming that it's going to be fine, you can extract a lot of fun out of this IM. And if I were to compare it with sets like the S12 Pro or even the S12 Ultra, compared to the S12 Ultra, the Astralis takes a few risks in order to make the entire sound being fun, and it does not fail at that. And comparing to the S12 Pro, the Astralis makes it look like a thing of the past. It's a relic at this point, because the S12 Pro had a very nasty problem regarding sibilance and coming off quite fatiguing, and the Astralis doesn't do any of that. So it's a massive improvement on that front. If I were to compare it with sets like the Heyday, although that I actually said that the Heyday comparatively is more sibilant than the Astralis, I would pick the Heyday over the Astralis personally. Why? I'll tell you. Because the shell is easier fitting, that's one. Second, the bass response of the Heyday is shockingly tight. Tight as in, not in terms of quantity. Quantity is definitely present, although in moments it could come off slightly less compared to the Astralis, but it doesn't have the perceived boom that I had when I was listening to Mariscos on the Astralis. It has a better degree of polish, it has a faster attack, and a more well-timed cutoff in terms of decay. And the mid-range is damn open on the Heyday compared to the Astralis, where I could feel that the Astralis was feeling a bit closed off. It's not claustrophobic by any means. It does not suffocate the notes, but it does sound narrower in comparison to the Heyday. And if I were to compare it with the Aether, I think it's going to be depending upon what you prefer. So if you prefer a less bass heavy, more mid-open, but still coming off quite smooth, non-fatiguing and even non-sibilant, then the Aether is going to be a better recommendation from my end. But if you want some more vibrance, if you want some fun with a damn good degree of polish in terms of detail and separation, I think the Astralis is going to be a better pick. So it completely depends upon your preferences. Lastly, 7 hertz divine. There's nothing divine about that IEM. Throughout the time that I heard it, I found it to be a very bloaty, incoherent mess. And when I A-B'd the Astralis with the Divine, I found that the Divine was a well executed joke. And considering it's the same company that made the Timeless 1 and 2, I don't know what they actually based the tuning on the Divine on. So Astralis is for the win. Now the two important questions: will I buy it at retail or will I buy it at used? Depending upon the feet and seal, I think Astralis is one of those IEMs that you need to try before you buy. If it sits well with you, it's an absolute recommendation from me. But if you can find it at a better price with coupons of your select retailers or something in a used market, I think it's a better value for money if you buy it used compared to the Astralis. It's still not a bad IEM, but it earns a stronger recommendation from me if you buy it used or at a discount rather than paying full price at retail. So that's about it for the Astralis. I enjoyed it. Let me know down in the comments how you felt about the IEM, if you have heard about it. And if you have any requests for me to cover IEMs, please do let me know. I'll try my best to cover them. So let's meet again for the next episode. Stay well, stay hydrated. That's it from Monk Bros Audio. See you.